Hey, Mark. I can't hear you. You're muted. Or maybe it's my volume that's off.
I don't know.
No, it was my volume.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, so probably lighter attendance today because of IETF,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we can still do a number of things, and then people can watch the recording if they want.
Well done at the meeting, at the IETF meeting. But it's interesting how culturally there's a tension with confidential computing.
Yeah, I don't think it's cultural. I think, well, for one, members of this group should not be fighting in front of IETF, and
Should not what?
should not be having like arguments in front of IETF. It's better to come with a prepared front. Now, there was a legitimate typo. Usama, being very literal, pointed it out, and then it kind of went from there. And I corrected the typo when I noticed it. And then I just went and updated the document accordingly. And then I think ultimately what happened is we had a good discussion. And the thing is, we need to work with them. And while we need to make developments in our own domain, eventually I think it needs to come to Whimsy as internet drafts, etc., which is what they basically said. Like anyone can submit a draft. Nobody is excluded. It's just, we cannot be perceived as an outside effort. Like I made an effort to convince them, yeah, no, we seek to be compatible, etc. But I think they want to be sort of the final arbiter of what goes into the space, which is I'm fine with, because I think the best ideas will win. But they're not quite equipped to handle confidential computing, because it's not their domain of expertise. So that's what we bring.
Right.
So
I think that my comment about the cultural thing is that it's not just within Whimsy. It's in fact across many working groups where first there's a lack of knowledge about confidential computing. That's the problem we see across the whole industry anyway.
yeah,
But I think there's also a kind of the idea of having to trust the hardware, which is kind of funny because they have to trust the hardware anyway. But the reliance on hardware attestation is something that some people are very reluctant about, which
unless you deal with homomorphic encryption, but that's not something that is hugely
right.
deployable. Hello, everyone else. Hello, Mo. I don't think we've met. Hello, Bob.
And by the way, I'm going to mute and turn off my camera because I just got some food and I'm starving. So I'm going to eat and I want to spare you.
All right. So today we're going to, and I just started sharing my screen, so bear with me. Okay. So we're going to review the changes made to the document because I would like to get up to the attack for charter approval. And again, we can still making change to the charter. Okay, I just want to get it to a space where we broadly agree with the content. And that's going to be the first order of business today. So I'm not exactly sure what this workload identity. Why is this a comment? I do not understand. Oh, that's how I was searching for the word. Never mind. Okay, so the first change was there was process isolation. And really what we're talking about workload isolation, because we're talking maybe it's a virtual machine that's the workload. So I hope there is no objection to this. Oh, by the way, for those of you who may not have seen this document, I'm going to put the link into the chat. I have my Gmail window open right here. So if you request access, I'll promptly grant it. Just as soon as I get the email. All right. So okay. So if there are no objections, I'll quickly change this. Okay. The next thing is we wanted to note that isolation is not against just the hardware and OS owners administrators, but also against the peer workload instances. So again, I hope there's not going to be not a controversial change. All right. I also mentioned as an architectural shortcoming the inability to associate a credential with a set of decisions leading up to its issuance, because again, these are architectural limitations that are then reflected in how we choose to define trustworthy workload identity. So again, I will accept this unless I hear someone object. And these are not 2 requirements, that's now 3. So and yeah, feel free in asynchronously to read through this doc, especially if you're new to it. Ask questions, maybe suggest changes. Try to go to suggestion mode, not editing mode. All right, so we had a very spirited discussion at the Whimsy IETF meeting yesterday. We only had like 10, 12 minutes, but and then there was a subsequent discussion on the Whimsy mailing list. But the sort of the long and short of it is the workload identity is something that's really hard to define, although I do attempt it below. But what I think we agreed upon is there is still a concept of a workload identifier. And the workload identifier is something that is a very stable construct. So, payroll application. And then you may be rolling out an update to this thing. Maybe you're rolling it back because there is a bug. Maybe you migrated the workload to, sister hardware during some sort of a data center operation. The relying party needs to be, for deployability reasons, isolated from all of that. That's captured by intermediaries like verifiers, identity providers, etc. But the identifier, as seen by the relying party, is stable. So think years. Right. And much like any one of us has, some sort of very stable identifier that is not going to change, or it's a massive undertaking to change it. Whereas things like credentials, driver's licenses or passports or whatever, they are ephemeral in that they lack permanence, while identifier has permanence. So I'm introducing basically what used to be called workload identity here, as I'm basically replacing it in response to the conversation with Whimsy with workload identifier. So again, please. Okay, Manu, I thought you had your hand up. All right, you can keep eating. Okay, so I will update this change. So now we're basically the way we defined identity. We're now basically going to talk about identifier. Now I introduce workload identity so that at least we still know what we're talking about, what workload identity is. And then this is where we say it's a combination of workload identifier, a number of additional claims. That could be a little bit more controversial, so do speak up if you, because again, everybody's saying it's so difficult to define this thing. But if we can't define it, then we can't refer to it. We cannot talk about it. And this is why I'm trying to put something down. So for instance, let me give an example for what workload identity might mean. Well, maybe, the workload identifier is payroll application, but part of workload identity, so identifier is payroll application, but workload identity might also include some things about, I don't know, where the workload is running. Manu.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with the changes that you made. I do think that when we talk now about identifier instead of identity, there's a question about the binding of that identifier with the workload again. So I don't know if in your mind if that's not a problem, or if we need to consider that. I think identity embodied the workload itself in some way. So it implied the thing, but the identifier is something that relates to the thing. And so there's a binding challenge there too.
Yeah. So I would actually, now I'm thinking about it, I'm actually not happy with this wording. Let me explain why. So what I would rather do is refer to workload identity, just for sake of Just putting something out there, like a colloquial term that encompasses workload identifier, something like that. Because again, it's hard to define, but I want something to talk about. And the reason I don't want to say combination of workload identifier, number of additional claims, like part of your credential might be audience. An audience is not a property of a workload. It's not part of workload identity, who the audience of the credential is. So I would rather say workload credential, I would then be saying the ephemeral identity document that is short and long-lived, that's used to represent and prove the workload identity, and a number of additional claims. I would rather put it there. And then workload identity would simply be this more, kind of a looser concept, which is probably good enough, because ultimately we'll say it's really ultimately about the workload identifier. So how about this? Document containing workload identifier and a number of additional claims. So that is what I would say. And then workload identity, I would say, is a colloquial term generally referring to the workload identifier. Something like that. That I think is a little cleaner.
So, question is the uniqueness aspect of a workload identified as a credential, or is it inherent in the identifier itself?
So a workload identifier, it depends on what you mean by uniqueness. Certainly, when we say this is a payroll application, it's the payroll application. It's not some other. It's not a payroll application. It's the
Right.
payroll application. Now, it could also be that workload may be running in multiple places, right, with the exact same identity. So, unlike humans, workloads can easily be cloned.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking, does it have a does it contain a like a URI or a certificate indicating that?
That is an implementation detail, but the workload identifier in both Whimsy and Spiffy is a URI.
Okay.
But then also it's a little more subtle than that. So even in that in that URI, there is a stable component, and then there is an additional like number of things like location, which that is going to be more changeable. But the stable portion would be like payroll application. Right. So I don't want to get into the representation here. That's for later. Because again, this is a charter document. We want a
Yeah.
very crisp and contained definition, and then everything else goes into reference architecture, into requirements, and to sort of all the other things. Make sense?
Yeah. And so then workload lineage is where the verifiability component would come into it.
Yeah, so a lineage might be as like, and again, this is discussed later in the document, because we basically have a section down there that actually goes and discusses captures some of the discussions we've had in this working group. So lineage might be like a serial number.
Okay.
And a serial number is something that there is some store, some system of record. I can go in there and say, so I have a credential with this serial number. Can you please tell me how did you come to be? Or sometimes in the next 59 you have issuance policy OIDs. Again, they tell you this credential was issued because it satisfied the following policies. So those would be examples of lineage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so. And again, the reason I have now workload identifier, workload identity, I could have just skipped this term, but then I have to like go massive renaming, and it doesn't roll off the tongue, for instance, to say prove workload identifier to relying party. It's really what we're proving is workload identity. Because identity, again, implies identifier, and that's why I'm saying it's a colloquial term. Everyone says it's hard to define. I just want to give it just some place in the world. Yeah, we can revisit all of this later. So I'll leave these two changes for now so people can review. Linkage I'd like to accept. It's been in the document for now over a week. So if there are no objections, we'll say that's how we think about it. Again, this is throughout the lifetime of the workload instance. This mirrors this trustworthy, it mirrors this, the way we talk about architectural shortcomings. So that's just repeating of the same word. So I'm going to accept that. I'm going to skip over these for a minute because both of these are contentious. I do not believe they belong here. That they still belong, but maybe in requirements. So we can have Manu introduce number 5. I believe Yogesh introduced number 4. But again, I want to argue against them, but I want to first accept all the stuff that's not controversial. So one of the goals of the SIG would then be to precisely define and publish, and we already have a document in GitHub, all scenarios, requirements that trustworthy workload identity must meet. So I can't imagine this is controversial, that we want to define requirements in the SIG. So I'll go accept that. And somebody suggested, and I put it in writing, that we will also want the goals would be to provide reference open source implementation. So again, I don't expect much pushback on this, just want to make the change publicly. All right, so a few other additional clarifications. So it was Dion, who was it? Yeah, Diana, who asked a question whether workloads can nest. And I said, yeah, of course, right? So a workload can comprise smaller individual sub-workloads. Maybe instead of be composed, I would say comprise. Few words.
Well, actually, yeah, what's interesting about the word compose is then the noun composition, the composition of the workload. So
let's keep compose.
Okay. English, but composition is an interesting word.
Okay, let's keep that. So sub-workloads can have individual identities used for intra-workload communication. So the only thing I'm going to do here is, because workload identity, I capitalize all the terms that are defined. So workload is a defined term. It's not going to like capitalization like this, but okay, so again, take a look at this paragraph and let me know if you have any issues with it. Again, if this proves incorrect, we can change that later, but I believe that is, you know, so if my workload has 10 little workloads inside of it, but I dare to speak about the workload identity as of the entire unit, then if you're going to present that workload to the outside, then you need to speak for the entire workload. If you want to speak for just yourself, then you can speak, of course, for the the sub workload.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It also will bring up again the bindings and all kinds of good stuff when we actually get to the
yeah, but that's we don't need to create a large contract here. This is just an outline.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. So then I will accept that. Workload identifier is a stable construct on which relying parties can form long-term service policy. So again, this used to be identity, now it's identifier. And the cause was so you can read that. That's just we're basically capturing the fact that your relying party can look at the identifier and not be bothered with changes to whatever makes up that workload. All right, so again, this is just a copy and paste of something previous. So in this section, we just go repeat some of the wording above, and then we capture some of the earlier discussions we've had. This is very long, and I want Yogesh in the room to speak to this, but I will just message him privately and ask him to resolve this comment thread. Let's see. Lineage provides linkage between the workload credential and some auditable metadata. So again, take a look at this and see if you like how this sounds. If I don't hear any objections, I'll accept.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine. The issue with linkages is that, again, it doesn't reflect the strength of the binding that we want on those things. But and I love lineage because lineage has this kind of inherent characteristic. Linkage feels a bit weak, but I'm fine to go along with it. Again, we don't need to be super exact in this initial movement.
Correct. Just precise enough. And then this is an explanation why we use lineage and not provenance.
It doesn't talk about provenance. I'm not sure. I understand what lineage is, rather than deliberately.
I view
So
it as lineage is more the journey that it's gone through. So what's described there, it's the process that it's gone through.
So yeah, provenance would be more of the process. So this is a case of, say vendor software. So lineage may give me some information about why, a vendor's workload has the, workload credential that it does, but it will probably hide a lot of stuff that as a customer of that vendor, I may not have information about. I may only have a contractual obligation with them about something. So lineage, like kind of, gives me some information, but it may require, I don't know, like a formal request or a subpoena or something for them to, open up the lid a little bit. Versus like provenance would then, oh, we compiled this piece of code, we, deployed it this way, it went through the following controls, etc. That's like provenance is a bit more detailed. That's where it comes from. And again, I don't know if it's coming through that way.
Yeah, I thought it would be the reverse. I thought lineage was a more detailed and precise term than provenance, but I'm not a native English speaker, so I may not understand the meaning of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I view lineage as, how did the data move? What transformations did it go through on its way? So the build system would be a transformation, for example,
So would you then, would that recommendation to just basically swap the two terms?
Well, so if the goal is to prove where it came from, who created it, and when it was created, that would be provenance to me.
So we have two concepts. There is whatever we're discussing now, lineage versus provenance, which is really how did it come to be? Something about, like something that can lead to the history. And then there's credential issuer, which is simply like the signer of the credential, somebody who ultimately, decided, like for instance, so my lineage may mean that I was born in Moscow, Russia, and did a few things. My credential issuer is the United States government for my passport. Right, and they may have examined themselves, but they came to the decision of issuing me my passport through a series of decisions that may not have included lineage, right? So I'm happy with whatever, but there has to be, I guess, the information I'm trying to convey here is it gives us something, but not necessarily everything.
But does it give us authenticity and integrity? Is that the key goal?
Well, the idea is a set of decisions has been made in order to issue that credential, right? And so without lineage, without that like unique serial number in the credential, all I know is the credential was issued by someone I trust. So there is an example here. Okay, that may the first one, that's more like this is not normative, but it's like, okay, so Bob, or say Hitler could keep secrets, right? Because he was a military man. You could hurt him, you can trust him to hurt people and like, go advocate for Aryan nation and go down the line. So those were the confidentiality and integrity properties. But that has nothing to do with trustworthiness. Trustworthiness would be like, I would need to ask around about Bob and say like, so yeah, I know Bob can keep secrets and I know Bob, is very set in his ways. So it can be like the behavior is predictable, but is the behavior good? And that's where lineage comes in. Like it's a way of tying the credential to something that we can then ask further questions. Maybe synchronously because this is a $10 trillion transaction. Maybe asynchronously because it's a $100 transaction that we might need to revisit it later, but at no immediate risk. That sort of thing.
So is it right for me to say that lineage is basically provenance plus some other additional information that
If that's how you
establish?
feel, then we need to flip it. Like basically we need something that's lesser of the two, not necessarily the full thing.
Okay. Because initially what I had in my mind was that for lineage, it's kind of like a weaker version of provenance. So it's whatever that provenance can prove. It can also be things that we do not have a way to verify. So we kind of like include everything into this like term called lineage. So,
yeah. So if you ask, so let me put it this way: the way this has been defined so far, lineage is the thing from which I might be able to define provenance, may or may not be able to. Like but there is something that has more information and there's something that has less. This tries to capture less with maybe possibility of more if you go like, open the right data store. So like there is not much you can tell from a serial number unless you go get into some store where a bunch of decisions were recorded. That's what we're trying to capture here. Just enough to.
So I just asked ChatGPT, and I'm going to copy the result because I think lineage really shows all the transformations and the full process, while provenance only says where it's coming from.
Okay,
so
then we need to basically switch.
Yeah, I'll copy the result in the chat.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
In fact, instead of chat, we need it as a bullet point, right? Because we need to capture that. So let me look again. Let me do this. Lineage, the only terms.
Well, let's see if I have the document open.
So that would be provenance now.
I will open it, but in the meantime, I'll put it in the chat.
That's fine. Okay, so we changed it here.
Where do you want me to copy this?
A bullet point. Make it the last one, and then we'll find the right place for it.
The last one where? At
The
the
last
bottom?
bullet point at the bottom, yeah, of this section.
I'm sorry, which section are you in?
Lineage once established.
Yeah, got it.
Actually, this one I can just leave lineage versus provenance.
So I have a question here.
Yeah.
Regarding the key differences that Manu posted, it means that lineage cannot be there if provenance is missing, right? Like so if you don't have
Correct.
any.
You wouldn't be able to, right?
I see.
Yeah, we're basically saying there is a morsel. Okay, like maybe there is more, but at the very minimum, like for the to establish trustworthiness, there has to be a morsel of information that we can then follow as a, like, you know, a set of breadcrumbs to a decision of whether that, you know, the like trust really should be placed in this thing. This is over and above just trusting the credential issuer.
Yeah, so this workload was put there by JP Morgan, and that's probably
Yeah.
enough for most people.
Right.
But then lineage would be all the steps that Mark pushed it using.
That's right.
this-
So somebody shows up at my door, shows me a passport from China. Okay, well, all right, you're a Chinese citizen, but
The
what
lineage
else?
would be
Lineage will be, you know, give like how, you know, something that something I can follow to make my own decisions about how far I want to take the trust to.
right. So I agree with the change, and but my initial interpretation of lineage was what I was strongly supporting, that we should have, it's not just that, oh, there's a serial number, that the binding of the serial number with whatever information it unlocks, the authenticity, like Bob was saying earlier, you want to know that all of that is actually reliable. But I understand this is a charter document and all that good stuff. We'll have those interesting
Correct.
conversations later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are kind of like flipping we are going to flip these two terms, right?
Yeah, we just did.
Provenance. Okay. Okay.
We just did. So all of this, so these are discussions of parts of the definitions that we were considering as part of the three, but then we basically said, no, like so like these things, the ones that I hope will not be part of the core definition, but I want to move them into a separate document to keep the discussion, but this is not part of the charter, why we chose not to, keep certain definitions. I can do that after the meeting.
And I'm fine. I trust your judgment, Mark. You're a great leader for this exercise here. And
Flattery will get you
but
everywhere, I think.
I did want to put the the thought there, so that's why I put it there. But happy to move it somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I want to keep these are great requirements. They're great requirements, right? So we have a requirements file in GitHub. So do a pull request. In fact, review it and see what other changes you want to make. Let's keep this. It's just there are definitional issues, and then there are requirement issues, and requirements will seek to meet them all, right? So we will, if we designate something a requirement, we will do everything it takes to meet the requirement in the reference architecture. So that we're not blowing it off. It's
Understood.
just I want to make sure that our definition is succinct, very, very tight.
Understood.
Mm-hmm. So look, you cannot have trustworthy workload identity without isolation. You just can't. Like that's inarguable, right? You cannot have trustworthy identity without binding. And for reasons of Hitler, we cannot have trustworthy identity without lineage, right? Because Hitler. Right. So those are the things that you can't get away from, no matter your scenario. Right. If you don't care about those things, go to regular whimsy. You're not part of this group. That's fine. Right. But
I hope we're not recording this.
oh yeah, we are. So,
It always
okay.
ends in Hitler.
So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to basically now I'm gonna put these into the notes clarification. So it's gonna go under 9 and then 10, 11. So this, all it means is there'll be a separate document that I will create that will maintain all our discussions on these topics. And we will come back to them because the next thing we need to do is the reference architecture. So, okay. Oh, sure. No, that's probably not what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do, I don't want to destroy my comment, I want the deletion. Okay, that's what all right. So, so now we have an agreement on the goals. We have notes and clarifications. We're keeping all of that. In fact, I could even move that into a separate document too. I also, there is a, Diona asked about sealed glass proofs, and I just simply added the, the definition in case somebody was curious. Okay, what else? Why? Okay. All right, so I think we're in good enough shape now to take this up to the TAC. So I'll clean this up. The next thing I want to do when this thing wakes up. So there is now a draft reference architecture document. Okay, so really there is no architecture in it. It's just a list of topics. Okay, so there's a bunch of lore and some stuff. We'll fill that in. We need to start working on that next. But this is what I want to draw your attention to. So in here, there is a section that, will remove after, we answer all the questions in it, because all of this, I believe, needs to be part of the reference architecture, answers to all of these questions. This is enough to make your head spin, like I promise. There's a lot. So please take a look. I would like to see what else we can add to that list now, and then we will go and start perhaps putting some words to paper in the weeks ahead.
Do you want to keep the word compound there, or do we want to use composable? The last bullet, yeah.
First of all, let me put the link to the document in the chat. So again, you have an opportunity to go and request access if you need it. There are many words here that could be used. One is aggregate workload. So I've heard that term. I've seen that term used. Aggregate workload is where it basically goes across silicon in the same device. Oh, thank you for all those requests. Let me go grant them all. Give me a second here. So that one's granted.
Continue to prefer the composable composition, because it feels like it's intentional. There's intentionality in bringing it together.
Mm-hmm.
Compound and aggregate feels like it just happened to be. Composition really is more with the provenance and the lineage thing. There's intentionality in it.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Let's take two different types of composition. One is I have my payroll application, and it has different components inside of it, so what I would call sub-workloads, right? And so they are independent workloads that, perhaps the payroll application runs on a number of devices. It's a big application that has, parts to it, as any cloud application might. So again, there is an identity of the payroll application, but perhaps, there is like a logging workload in there that goes and like all of its job is to do logs, right? So that's one scenario. The other scenario is the payroll application has a component that does some sort of payroll data analytics. And it is, yes, it's part of that bigger payroll application workload, but it now has a GPU that it runs on, right? So are we then treating a workload that has, bits running on the CPU and bits running on the GPU and bits running on, a smart NIC as composite? And then the fact that I have a data analytics component of a payroll application and a logging component of a payroll application, maybe something else, as also composition, or are they, or because one talks about, this is what in the earlier discussions in this group we called payload slices. And that's actually in the GRC SIG, we talked about payload slices. So I have a payload, and this is something that's supposed to run confidentially. But some of it runs on the CPU, one slice runs on the CPU, another slice runs on the GPU. Is it also composition?
Yeah, I mean, for me, they're all components. And I think, again, components, compose, composition, it just feels like there's intentionality. Composite is more like an observation of something that's composite, or compounds or aggregate is just an external observation. Composition is you orchestrate it, right? You put it together with intentionality. And I think the intentionality is what really all of us here are looking for, is that it's not there by coincidence or by chance. It's been put there for a reason. So I think it really is a component of a bigger whole of the.
Sure. So that's entirely reasonable position to take. Is there ever going to be a case where we want to specifically discuss one or the other scenario, in which case having the same word for them is going to be problematic?
Yeah, maybe. But honestly, from a point of view of the relying party, I think that they don't care. They want to know that it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
So the fact that it runs on a GPU or on a NIC or whatever is, I think, from the relying party perspective, which I love, by the way, when you talked about the identity, it's all about the people who's going to make the decision whether or not to interact with this thing, right? It is a relying party perspective. And so from that perspective, I don't think it matters. So I think components and composite and composition are, the right terms.
Yeah. Okay, so let's settle on composite then. Again, take a look at this list, see if there's anything major missing, because then the next thing I want to do is I want to basically solicit volunteers to start authoring some of the content. And by the way, I think a very important task would be to review all the Whimsy documents, because there is stuff on credential exchange, which so there was an early draft. Let me back up and talk a little bit about what happened in Whimsy yesterday, because before we jump back into this.
You mean today,
so,
right?
For those of you who did not attend the Whimsy IETF. So they talked about doing some level of synchronization with RATS, which is the Remote Procedures for Attestation IETF draft. And this is something that's driven out of the attestation SIG in the consortium. Osama is, I think, involved in some of that. Then there is the workload identity patterns. What exactly was it called? I now forget. But they talked about, there's going to be the last call by the next meeting. So we still have a few months until IETF 123, but it's information only. The current technology was described, there are security considerations, and we have a chance to provide feedback and see if there is anything in there that contradicts confidential computing. So one of the things that I heard said that I actually found, most of it I like, one of the things I heard that was unsettling is someone said, again, they're not talking on behalf of Whimsy Group necessarily, but it's sort of the feeling in the air is Whimsy, according to this person, treats the platform as more or less trusted. I think that's like a direct quote. And to which
it's been said several times, Mark. So I think it is very much that's the model.
yeah, and this is also how Spiffy works. You trust your node attestation basically,
Right.
and you trust your platform. And we are a sharp departure from that, right? So it's going to be a bone of contention, I suppose. But this is the kind of thing that we still have a chance to comment on their working documents of Whimsy before something like this goes into final call. So that needs to be done.
In a separate meeting, in a side meeting actually on, that Usama was giving, there was a Whimsy guy who spoke up. I don't know who he was, but he basically said that he doesn't think that there's that much of a distance between these two models, because in his mind, the confidential computing would basically verify the node, and then the node would verify the workload. So in his model, he could align the two models.
In his mind, he can, but that means you need to basically have some sort of an intermediate CA that can attest workloads while running locally on the platform.
A test workload that can run locally on the platform.
Well, so your Spiffy agent.
As opposed to doing, okay, I see what you mean. As opposed to doing a direct remote attestation of the workload itself.
Yes.
But the when you do an attestation of the workload, you do get the quote that comes from the chip. So it is in essence a proxy for the node, right? I think that was the mental model.
Except that's not how Spiffy works, right? And with Spiffy, the workload API takes no parameters. You call it, and it gives you back an X509.
Correct. You're right.
And that's right. So they're still not compatible. So I think this person was talking out of intuition, but like that's the intuition is unfortunately wrong.
Well, except it may not be just intuition, is that the two concepts are there, the node and the workload. Is just like you said, that in the Spiffy, they have an API in between, while we would do a direct attestation of both, right? And so that may just be the delta between the two models.
Maybe, but we'll need to, we'll need to close it somehow. Okay, so let's just rolling along. The next stop was on credential exchange, and the credential exchange basically says, how are you going to obtain credentials for your workload? And, the author specified three models. One was on demand, and that's basically, your workload starts at some point in time. It needs a credential. It calls the platform. Platform returns a credential. The second one was at startup, and this is, effectively somebody obtained the credential, placed it on some sort of a volume. Your container starts. The volume is mounted inside the container. You read the credential off of the container. Like completely not what confidential computing does, but okay. And the third one is exchange with the issuer. So basically, you talk some sort of issuer, you authenticate to it, and it gives you another credential. And so I did not see how confidential computing neatly fits into any one of these three. So the credential exchange document would probably also needs to be reviewed with our eyes on it to see which. Maybe there is a fourth model, or maybe there is a way to wedge what confidential computing does into the existing model. But this, I think, working with the Whimsy group would be a big part of what we do here. So maybe we need to submit an internet draft with some of our definitions. Again, we'll need to talk about that. But again, what I noticed at sort of a purely human level, when we did a presentation on our behalf to IETF, and you can watch the recording, the chair basically said, look, this is not IETF. They're not subject to our intellectual property rules. These are outsiders. So I kind of almost sensed some sort of an allergic reaction here.
I was in the room. And the visual expression was very much like that too.
Yeah. So we'll need to I don't mind playing by their rules. I'm after the outcome, not the forcing our process on them. But we will need to strategize around how to work with them going forward. So, all right, that was my brief summary. Perhaps what we can start doing, on the expectation that the charter is going to get, accepted by the TAC on Thursday, is we can, the parts of the the reference architecture that we can, we think are, can be written down right away. Let's start writing them down. There is a very big part of our work that is still ongoing, and this is gap analysis. So there is a document on SPIFFE gap analysis. This is the one I've been discussing with Peter Castleman, who is the director of product at Spiral. There is the Whimsy gap analysis, which I actually think deserves a closer look. The two documents are in very different formats, but it requires additional edits. We need to see what the delta is between us and them. Quite a bit of work. In total, I'm hoping somebody can take a look at that and also give a gap analysis, so we can start working with whatever that standard is. And of course, Manu, you have HashMesh. You can speak to that. All right, so that's sort of, making sure our requirements are properly captured, again, in the view of some of the things that we didn't make the definition, but we want to make sure the requirements reflect. That would be a fantastic, thing to do, is to put some pull requests in place to make sure that our requirements are solid. Because again, that's another big thing, probably even above trying to write the reference architecture. All right, we have 7 minutes left. Anything else that I may have missed?
No, it was very comprehensive and very effective, Mark.
Well, thank you. Well, we'll need to move fast because we have a mountain of work ahead of us. So I want to basically a combination of doing a good job in the moment, but also not getting bogged down in details that can be worked out later.
Yeah.
Well, if I hear nothing else, then let me just say again, requirements, very big part. So take a look at the requirements doc, update it, do a pull request. Let's review. We can do that in next week's meeting. I will take the charter to TAC for approval. Review gap analyses if you can. Review IETF documents from Whimsy, in short order. We can do pull requests against them, or we can file issues in GitHub. If you don't know what their GitHub is, I will write it down here. So I actually took it down. It's gonna be IETF GitHub.io. I believe I got this right. So you can go there and see all the current state. Because again, working with Whimsy is going to be a very big part of what we do going forward. And with that, I will send out the meeting minutes after I hang up, and I will see you all perhaps Thursday. If you're in the GRC SIG, I believe that meeting is tomorrow. I could be wrong, but I think so. Or maybe not this week. Let me take a look. No GRC SIG meeting this week. Those are bi-weekly. So yeah, I'll see you in the TAC meeting on Thursday, and same time, same place here in a week. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day. See you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.